Good morning. Morning. Young but not so young. Anyway, I was gonna do this before you got all shady. Every time she comes to youth service or there's something at church, she will come and she would try to stress me out. She would try to have an intellectual debate with me, and she always loses.
That's not true.
But you are doing a very good job this morning, and I wanted to say that in front of everybody. And one of these days you will be young but not so young. Go say that. Good morning again. I should not have taken this assignment to speak this morning. Chantel repeatedly asked me. I said yes. Chantel gave me a couple suggestions to use, and then turned around and used all these suggestions when she wrote the skit. So everything that was said already for the morning, you will hear again. Thanks, Chantel. Right. I'm supposed to speak about integrity. I was also told to be only about 15 minutes. I will endeavor to be that short this morning. I just been waiting for Joan to start the PowerPoint. I just kidding. I didn't give you one. It's okay. The definitions I have for integrity from the Merriam-Webster's dictionary is a firm adherence to a code of especially moral or artistic values. Another word is incorruptibility. And from the Cambridge Dictionary is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. So this morning we're going to look at two Bible characters and their contrasting attitudes when it came to integrity. The first one is David. David's story can be found in 2 Samuel chapter 11. It's a long story. I'm not going to really go through it like verse by verse, but I will give you a rundown for those of you who don't know it, but most of us who've been coming to church for a long time should know the story of David and Bathsheba. Basically, David was up on his roof one morning, walking around, looking at God's glory. Joseph, behave. He saw Bathsheba. He desired Bathsheba, and he sent people to inquire who she was. She came, and things happened. David got her pregnant, and then he tried to pin the pregnancy on her husband because David was not supposed to be sleeping with another man's wife. So in order to put the jacket on the man, as the people would say these days, David brought home the man from war because he was out fighting. And he figured when this man comes home, he's going to be so glad to be home, he will go and spend time with his wife. The man's name was Uriah. But the man held the position that he is not comfortable going home to sleep in a comfortable bed next to his wife when his fellow soldiers are out fighting and dying, and the Ark of the Covenant is in a tent in a field. So he slept by the gate. This did not go according to David's plan. David thought, well, I would be home with my wife. So the next day, David threw a feast, basically got the man drunk, thinking, okay, he drunk. He definitely going home to his wife this time. But as the definition that I gave of integrity before said, a firm adherence to a code of morals. This man, even though he was drunk, did not go home to his wife. You know, they say two things that tell the truth is children and drunk people. That's because when you get drunk, I've never been drunk, so I wouldn't know. You lose your inhibitions, and the true you tends to come out. So this was the true Uriah. Uriah genuinely felt that he should not be enjoying himself when people are out there fighting and dying. So he still didn't go home. So David was getting desperate because he did not want the scandal that was going to happen. So he sent a message, long and short, he sent Uriah back to the front lines, and they set up Uriah to be killed. So Uriah was killed, and part of David's problem was gone. Now later on, Nathan the prophet came and had a conversation with David. He was like, David, let me tell you a story. Let me get your opinion on this. Said they had a man that had a lamb. One lamb, that's all he had. The lamb used to eat from his hand, sleep in his bed, basically this man child. And then they had another man, a rich man, had whole flock of sheep, all the sheep in the world. But he took this poor man's lamb and killed it and ate it. David was so upset. Now, when I was reading through this story and doing my research, it didn't occur to me that Nathan chose to frame the story as a man with a lamb specifically because David was a shepherd. And David had an affinity for sheep because that's what he grew up knowing. So David was blue vexed. This man deserved to die. And the rich man need to pay back 4 times over. And Nathan was like, but you's the man though. You take the man's wife. You could have had any woman you wanted, but you went for a married woman. And so said, so done. The child died. Nathan said, if I say Nathaniel, I mean Nathan, but I don't know why it going to Nathaniel in my head. I've had to correct myself twice. If Nathaniel slip out, I apologize, but I mean Nathan. Nathan said, God has forgiven you, but the child is going to die. And something else that I found out when I was reading this story is David basically passed judgment on himself. When he said the man needs to repay 4 times over, 4 of David's children died. I did not realize that. Bathsheba's son died, the same baby, died shortly after birth. Amnon, one of his sons, got drunk and was killed by Absalom. Absalom was stabbed to death. Well, yeah, he was stabbed to death basically by one of David's men, Joab. And then Solomon, another one of David's sons, had Adonijah killed. And Adonijah was another one of David's sons. 4. David said, you need to repay 4 times over. And those are the consequences of David's lack of integrity. He lacked integrity because he did not stick to his morals. And not just that he didn't stick to them, his attempts to cover up his nonsense was disgusting. He literally got a man killed because you can keep it in your pants. Now, shifting gears, we're going to go over to Genesis chapter 39 to the story of Joseph. This, as far as I remember is the Joseph I was named after. The one with the coat of many colors, the one that used to dream no foolishness. Dear God, give me patience. I get in talk back here. I can't say what's being said. But. So, another quick overview of Joseph's story. One other thing, kind of side note, Joseph and David had very similar upbringings. I didn't realize that until I was looking at them side by side. You can go home, do your research, but they were both shepherds. Their brothers kind of didn't like them. Their life was in turmoil, and they both ended up rising to positions of power. There's more than that. You can do your homework. But Joseph was sold by his brothers into slavery, and he ended up in Potiphar's house in Egypt. Now, from the beginning, Joseph showed so much integrity that Potiphar trusted him with everything in his house, including his wife. There are people today, rightfully so, men and women, that if you hire somebody to help in the house, if I am not here, you don't come work. I am not leaving you alone in the house with my spouse. I don't care. That is nonsense. And that's fine. Perfectly wise stance to have. Potiphar trusted David with Joseph. That is going to happen. I apologize. When I was making my notes, I was thinking Joseph, kept writing David. But for now, I'm talking about Joseph. So if I say David, you know who I mean. I'm young, but not so young. The mind started to slip a little bit. So there were points where Joseph could have been in the house with Potiphar's wife alone, and Potiphar had nothing to worry about when it came to Joseph. He had access to everything in Potiphar's house, except for Potiphar's wife. That's the only thing that was off limits. You could go into any room, you could do whatever you want, just not my wife. Potiphar never even had to check behind David. Basically, whatever David, Joseph, Joseph, get it together. Never had to check behind Joseph. Whatever Joseph did was well done because he had gotten to the place where his behavior was beyond question. His integrity was solid. Problem was, you know them Joseph boys ain't too bad looking. So Potiphar's wife took a liking to Joseph, and she tried multiple times to get him into her bed. But being who he was, Joseph refused. He did not want to dishonor Potiphar. He also did not want to dishonor God because they both had trusted him, and he valued their trust, and he did not want to do anything that would fracture the relationship with him and Potiphar or him and God. But she kept trying, and she kept trying, and eventually one day, when they were home alone, which was probably normal because, like I said, Potiphar trusted Joseph, she physically assaulted this man to get this man's goods. And he was like, nah, though, I ain't doing this. He shake off the coat, and he ran. And he left his coat there. And she said to the people, this Hebrew, she got a little bit racist, because at this point, you know, the Egyptians and the Hebrews, they had a kind of master-slave relationship, sort of. And she said, this Hebrew man that you brought in here tried to assault me. I have his coat as proof. I guess she felt rejected, and she had to get back. But she lied on him, and that ended up with Joseph going to prison. And the funny thing is, a lot of us would have, God, I serving you humbly, and you got me in prison, blah, blah, blah. The Bible doesn't say that Joseph did any of that. He went to prison, and because of his integrity, he was eventually put in charge of all the prisoners. And just like in Potiphar's house, everything Joseph did was well done. Everything he did prospered. The head of the prison did not check behind Joseph because he knew that if Joseph was assigned to do something, he would do it properly, he would do it when he was supposed to do it, and he would do it to the best of his ability. Because I don't have a lot of time, I'm going to skip chunks of the story. But starting in prison, Joseph eventually ended up in front of Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt. Pharaoh is basically a king because he had interpreted dreams for a couple people in prison. And then one night, Pharaoh had a dream he didn't understand. He asked for an interpreter. And somebody that was in prison with Joseph, the king's cupbearer is basically somebody that tastes the king's food before he eats it in case it's poison, so that if he dies, you know it's poison. So he will eat it, you wait a while, everything good, then the king will eat, right? He remembered that Joseph interpreted the dream, told Pharaoh. Pharaoh brought in Joseph, told him the dream. Joseph interpreted the dream. The dream was basically saying that there will be 7 years of bountiful harvest, and then there will be 7 years of famine coming to Egypt. And not only did Joseph interpret the dream, he also gave Pharaoh advice on how to handle it. He said, this is what's going to happen. This is what I think you should do. Now find somebody to be in charge. And Pharaoh was like, well, big man, you could be in charge. You got a good reputation. You seem wise. You interpret the dream. I ain't wasting the time. That's you. So basically, from now on, you are second in command in Egypt. There's nobody, and he's not an Egyptian. He is a Hebrew. There is nobody in Egypt in authority over you except for me. And that was all because he showed integrity. Because he could have interpreted the dream, and Pharaoh could have picked somebody else. But his reputation came with him. And he knew that Joseph, as he did in prison and in Potiphar's house, did not need to be looked after, that he would do the job to the best of his ability, and that the job would be successful. And eventually, Joseph saved Egypt from starvation, and also the surrounding nations from starvation. Joseph showed the utmost integrity because he never at any point he did anything to shame himself or to shame God or to shame those in authority over him. And he had multiple opportunities. He wasn't what Bajans call an eye servant. Too many of us are eye servants, including myself. We work with somebody looking, and then when they're not looking, just chill out. Especially government workers, no offense, Caffeine, but that's, I ain't talking about you, I talking about y'all. I used to work in government, so I've seen it myself. I have done it. When nobody ain't looking, I ain't working. And then when the boss come around the corner. But Joseph was not like that. He always did what he was supposed to do, how he was supposed to do it, and to the best of his ability. So the lessons that we can learn from this are, one, people who lack integrity and people who have integrity can be found at all levels of life. We look at two men who were pretty much, well, one was the actual ruler of his kingdom, and the other one was second in command. And they displayed very different things when it comes to integrity. David displayed none, and Joseph was the ultimate example. You can also learn that forgiveness is always available. This doesn't apply to Joseph because he did nothing to be forgiven for. But if you look at 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 13 and 14, Nathan tells David that the Lord has put away your sin, which means in terms of your wrongdoing, you are good in God's eyes. But, and this is the next lesson, decisions have consequences and outcomes, regardless of if you are forgiven or not. Because of David's actions, the baby died, and some of his other children died, and there was violence in David's family line for a long time, just because of what David did. But Joseph, his consequences and actions, he saved thousands of lives, and he was only put in a position to do so because he had proven he could be trusted. The last lesson is that God can God can use bad situations for his good. Joseph was sold into slavery by his jealous brothers. And he was framed by a woman because he rejected her advances. But he ended up as the ruler of Egypt. I think it's this particular story that uses the line, what the devil meant for evil, God meant for good. And Joseph basically saved the lives of the same brothers that sold him into slavery, because they then had to come during the famine to buy food from him. And even if you look at David's story, David eventually fathered Solomon, wisest man ever, one of the richest men ever, probably the richest man ever, who was a great king for the most part. And then Jesus himself came through David's lineage. And not just through David, he came through Bathsheba, the same woman that he had an affair with. Our Savior came from a woman that was involved in a scandal. I will just put it that way. So in closing, I will challenge all of us, including myself, to be people of integrity. Thank you.